So fellas, some of the title fights that we've got up and coming in the UFC, whether they're announced or we can kind of tell what's going to be next in every division, some of them are obvious picks. There's a certain fight that everyone's going to go for. It's not really an intriguing fight because we know the outcome. And then there's some title fights that are so 50-50, it's genuinely not even worth betting on. So I'm going to be going through every up and coming title fight, whether they've been announced or the ones that we can kind of guess is going to be next. And I'm going to be ranking them by the least to most close. So I've got 4 categories, one of them being it's an obvious winner. So these title fights have an obvious winner that everyone knows is going to win it. It's not really worth discussing. The next one is it shouldn't be close. So it's not like an obvious winner, but the title fight shouldn't be close on the betting odds. There's obviously a guy that most MMA fans, the majority of MMA fans are alluding to. There might be a couple of guys who are going with the other guy, but most of the MMA fans are going with a certain guy. The next one is fairly close, so it's actually a fairly close title fight. It's not 50-50 close. There's still a guy that most people are, using as their safe option, but it is a fairly close fight. And then we've got genuinely 50-50. I don't have a clue who's going to win this fight. The majority of MMA fans don't have a clue who's going to win this fight. It is a 50-50 fight, and we'll start off with the obvious winner. The first title fight to go into the category of an obvious winner, Jon Jones versus Stipe. This is like, it's just a fight that nobody wants to see. We want to see Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. I feel like at this point, we ain't in 2019 anymore. We don't want to see this fight because I'm so confident that Jon Jones is going to win. And even though, ironically, I do think Stipe is going to put up a more difficult fight than most people are expecting. I think it's going to be tougher than Cyril Gane, especially for the fact that Jones is coming back from an injury. I'm still 99.9% sure that Jon Jones is going to win this fight, whether it's a close decision or he finishes Stipe. I just don't see a world where Stipe wins this fight. He's been inactive since 2021, all the way back when he fought Francis Ngannou. He got knocked out cold. His last win was Daniel Cormier. He hasn't got a single win over anybody on the UFC roster right now. Jones has been more active recently, got a really good win over Cyril Gane. He's the heavyweight champion. Stipe is not even like in the top 3 most deserving guys for a title shot right now. And I'm just so confident that Jones wins this fight, and I think a lot of MMA fans are. That's why no one really has much interest in this fight. He's old, he's limping into arenas. Let's be honest, he doesn't deserve a title shot. He's coming off a loss. He's just been KO'd out cold. And out of everyone in the heavyweight division, Stipe is quite possibly one of the easiest opponents right now for Jon Jones. So I think the obvious winner in this fight is Jon Jones, whether it's a decision, whether it's a submission, or whether he manages to get like a ground and pound victory. Whatever the method is, I just don't see a world where Stipe wins. If Stipe did win, it would be one of the biggest upsets in UFC history, maybe the biggest upset in UFC history, because I'm going to be honest, I haven't seen a single person give Stipe a single chance in this fight. I haven't seen anyone even allude to the fact that they think he's going to win. So for the first title fight in the obvious winner, it is Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. And then the next fight on this obvious winner category is Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan. Now, this is much closer than Jones versus Stipe, and in fact, I would go as far to say Arman Tsarukyan is actually a really difficult fight for Islam Makhachev. He's definitely, a more difficult fight stylistically than Dustin Poirier. But because it's Islam Makhachev, I think there is an obvious winner. I just don't understand why anyone would even think to pick Arman Tsarukyan in this fight. They've fought before. Islam Makhachev beat him. Their performances against Charles Oliveira are completely different. Islam Makhachev went out there, dominated Oliveira, got the finish. Arman Tsarukyan took Oliveira to a fairly close decision. And just the way that they've been looking recently, Arman Tsarukyan could even get past Gamrot as well. I know it was a really close fight. You've just got to go with Islam Makhachev. I feel like he's a better grappler than Arman Tsarukyan. He's definitely a better striker than Arman Tsarukyan. He's got more experience in the championship caliber. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, compared to the rest of the contenders, Arman Tsarukyan provides a stylistic nightmare. He fought Islam Makhachev in his UFC debut, and it was actually a somewhat competitive fight, but competitive fight doesn't mean I'm going to ever go with Arman Tsarukyan, and I just don't know why anyone would really pick Arman Tsarukyan to beat Islam Makhachev in this fight. I think if there's anyone in the UFC that's going to beat Islam Makhachev, as of right now, I don't think it's going to be anyone at 155. I think the only guy to really beat Islam Makhachev in the UFC, a fight that could actually happen, is Leon Edwards. So I'm going to put Islam versus Tsarukyan in the obvious winner category, because even though Tsarukyan's more difficult than a couple of the other contenders, Islam's going to win. So I'm going to put Islam in obvious winner. And then shouldn't be close. Now, when I say shouldn't be close, I'm not saying it's not going to be a close fight. It's not going to, the outcome's not going to be close. I'm saying it shouldn't be close on the betting odds. So it might be a fairly competitive fight, but it shouldn't really be difficult to pick who's going to win. So the first fight in the shouldn't be close category is Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad. Now, the reason this isn't an obvious winner is because I've seen a few people actually think that Bilal Muhammad's going to win. I know a few people are doing it for kind of like the meme and the joke, but there are a few people who genuinely genuinely believe that Bilal Muhammad is going to beat Leon Edwards. And again, I just don't know why you would do this. Their first fight, you look at their first fight, it was only a few years ago. Leon Edwards was cruising through that fight. Seemed like he didn't really have any problems in that fight, and he was definitely on track to win in that fight. And people love to bring up the fact that Bilal Muhammad's improved so much since their first fight, when in reality, he had a fairly underwhelming fight against an injured Gilbert Burns. The Sean Brady fight was impressive, I'll give him that. And then apart from that, it's just him using grapple fests against guys like Wonderboy and Luke. You look at Leon Edwards as well. The dude beat, I know the second fight, the rematch, he kind of got the head kick KO. But in the third fight specifically, he had a really impressive fight with Usman, beating the pound-for-pound #1 guy. And then he goes out there and beats Colby Covington, completely shuts down Colby Covington's game. Leon's improved as well. This dude in the last couple of years has become one of the most well-rounded champions. He went from being just a one-dimensional striker to super well-rounded. And I think Leon Edwards is the obvious pick. Again, the champion experience, the fact that they fought before and Leon was winning that fight comfortably. And just the fact that Leon's beaten better opponents than Bilal Muhammad so far. So I would say this shouldn't really be close. This shouldn't really be a difficult fight to pick. If you want to bet some money on Bilal Muhammad just for that off chance that he could get a win, you could do that. And also, Leon's been facing grapplers recently. He faced Usman twice and Colby Covington. It's not like Bilal Muhammad is a completely different style. It's not like he's facing some JDM type style. He's facing another grappler after facing 3 in a row, 3 training camps before and the experience in the fight. I just think this shouldn't be close, and Leon Edwards should be the obvious pick. And then we've got a bit of a weird one because it's not an exact opponent, but Alejandro Pantoja. And I've got 3 different opponents. We've got Kai Asakura, who I'll talk about in a second, Muhammad Mokaev and Manel Kape. Now, obviously, Muhammad Mokaev and Manel Kape has kind of been promoted as the #1 contender fight for Pantoja. And then I've also included Kai Asakura because I've seen on Twitter and a few other social medias, there's been a rumor going around that Kai Asakura, this new Japanese star who's getting signed to the UFC, is going to be getting an immediate title shot, and Pantoja kind of hinted towards that as well. But we'll talk about each of the opponents. I mean, Mokaev and Manel Kape, I think Pantoja beats them. I think Pantoja would beat Manel Kape. I mean, he's beaten him before, and I think he'd do it again. And for Muhammad Mokaev, I know he's undefeated and is this new style, but I just think he's kind of a stylistic nightmare. I think Pantoja is a stylistic nightmare for Muhammad Mokaev. He doesn't have to worry about the striking. It's not like he has to get into a dogfight. He just has to beat Mokaev everywhere. So I think those are 2 fairly favourable matchups for Pantoja. And I think Kai Sakura as well. He's coming to the UFC and facing the guy who's been defending the flyweight belt for a while. I think that's a huge step up. And I think Pantoja would win all of these fights, and I think he should be the favourite going into all of these fights. But the reason this shouldn't be close and not obvious winner, it's because Pantoja makes fights that shouldn't be close. Now, what I'm saying, you look at his fight with Moreno. Fair enough, that probably, that was a super competitive fight. Nothing I can say there. But the Roy Val fight, that was closer than it should have been. The fight with Steve Erceg, that was Erceg's 4th fight in the UFC. That was way closer than it should have been. Pantoja just engages in dogfights recently and consistently. And I feel like Pantoja makes a lot of title fights closer than they should be. So that's why I can't just put it in obvious winner. But it shouldn't really be close. I would pick Pantoja to beat all 3 of these guys. Unless, one of them, either Mokaev or Manel Kape, look absolutely amazing at UFC 3 or 4. I would pick Pantoja to beat all 3 of these guys. And then we've got the category of fairly close. So it's a fairly close fight. Probably not worth betting on. But I would say there's one guy that most people are kind of going with. The first fight in fairly close is Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. I feel like most people are going with Israel Adesanya to win this fight. He's a much more technical guy than Dricus du Plessis. He's taken out so many different middleweights. Dricus barely beat Strickland. I know Adesanya lost to Strickland, but Dricus is kind of looked at as the worst champion right now, and a lot of people just think it's a very favourable matchup on the feet for Adesanya to go out there and clip Dricus du Plessis, especially from how hittable Dricus is. But there's definitely quite a lot of people picking Dricus to win this fight. It isn't like it's an absolute, Hail Mary pick if you're picking Dricus to win this fight, because he's definitely got the capability. I mean, he is the champion. He's undefeated in the UFC. He is dangerous. He seems like he's improving, especially with his stamina, and he's got the, the whole grappling offense, the pressure that he puts on Israel Adesanya, and it's just a completely different style to what Adesanya has seen. So I think it's a fairly close fight. I'm not going to say it's completely 50-50. Like I said, I would probably favour Israel Adesanya to win this fight, but it wouldn't surprise me if Dricus du Plessis was able to pull off a win here. I mean, we said the same thing about Dricus and Whittaker, where Whittaker's going to go out there and demolish him, and that wasn't the case. So I would say this is a fairly close fight. If I had to bet money, I would bet it on Adesanya, but it is still a fairly close fight as well. And then the next fight in the fairly close is Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. Now, the reason this is in fairly close and not 50-50 is that I still feel like a lot of people are picking Ankalaev to win this fight. Or maybe not publicly, but I feel like a lot of people do think that Ankalaev's going to win this fight. Now, I honestly did think that Ankalaev was going to beat Pereira. I would have said confidently that Magomed Ankalaev, yes, he's going to beat Pereira, take the belt off him. if you would have asked me this after Ankalaev's fight with Walker and before UFC 303, because Ankalaev is a nightmare matchup for Alex Pereira. But after Pereira's gone out there, slept Jamal Hill, slept Yuri, you've kind of got to, it's a lot closer than I thought he was before. You look at Magomed Ankalaev, it kind of reminds me of Makhachev versus Oliveira, this Brazilian champion who's taking everyone out, fan favourite, and then the Dagestani guy comes in, spoils all the fun. But no, Dagestani comes in, takes over the belt. And this is kind of similar to that with Ankalaev, because Ankalaev's a nightmare matchup. He's the first real wrestling threat in the light heavyweight division for Alex Pereira, and he's also got dangerous hands. We saw what he did to Johnny Walker and what he's done before. He's a big problem for Alex Pereira, and because of that, I feel like a lot of people and myself are probably thinking that Ankalaev definitely has the upper hand in this matchup, but at the same time, it's still fairly close. Alex Pereira keeps surprising everyone. The way that he dealt with Yuri Prochazka, the way that he dealt with Jamal Hill so easily, the way that he's looked in the light heavyweight division, the way that he's improving so rapidly, I think this is a fairly close title fight. If I had to bet money, even though I would love nothing more than for Pereira to win this fight, I still feel like it's kind of like that weird feeling that Ankalaev's going to get this done if he decides to go for the grappling. So I would say this is a fairly close fight. Probably not worth betting on. But it's not 50-50, but it's still a fairly close fight. And then we've got 50-50 fights where I genuinely couldn't tell you who I think is going to win. And from what I've seen online, MMA fans can't make their mind up either. The first one we've got is Sean O'Malley versus Merab. I can't wait for this fight. I know a lot of people are kind of hating on this matchup. They keep calling Merab boring. I feel like the whole narrative that Merab is boring is just because he's a wrestler. He's not even a boring wrestler. You look at the way he just demolished Yan and Cejudo. It's not even boring. But no, the reason this fight is so fun is because you've got Sean O'Malley, who is definitely the best striker in the Bantamweight division right now. The way that he knocked out Aljamain Sterling after Sterling was, looking like he was on track to dominate in the division. The way that he just absolutely dominated Marlon Vera for 5 rounds straight. The fights leading up to the title fight where he's having these scraps on the feet, and before the fight with Pitiano Munoz, he was just killing people, man. Sean O'Malley is definitely the best striker in the Bantamweight division, but it's funny because he's now facing the best grappler, or at least one of the best grapplers in the Bantamweight division in Merab. The way that he just... Henry Cejudo is a great wrestler. Cejudo's a great wrestler, and that's why I really regret this pick to this day. I really regret picking Cejudo to win that fight. But we know how good Cejudo is of a wrestler, and Merab just picked him up and made him look like an amateur in that fight. The way that he just dominated Peter Yan in that Fight Night main event, I thought Peter Yan would have made that way more competitive than it was. Again, Merab's making people look like amateurs because of how good his wrestling is. It's the best wrestler versus the best strikers. They look unstoppable recently, and it's a 50-50 fight. Before I was picking Merab, I thought the fact that he could do that to Henry Cejudo, who's one of the best wrestlers, he's obviously going to do it to Sean O'Malley. But then you look at Sean O'Malley and the fact that Merab gets caught a lot and that Sean O'Malley's one of the best strikers in the UFC. It's just a 50-50 fight. I wouldn't know who to pick in this fight, and I think it is genuinely 50-50. And also, the next 50-50 fight is Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. Again, another fight that I just can't wait for, man. This is probably the title fight in the UFC I am most excited for. Not only because it's 2 big names, not only because it's going to be an absolute banger of a fight, but I'm just so intrigued because I don't know who's going to win. I couldn't tell you who I think is going to win, because you've got Ilia Topuria. This dude is undefeated in the UFC, seems to be getting progressively better, just taking people out like it's nothing, just absolutely ragdolled Bryce Mitchell, demolished Josh Emmett, and then goes out there and is the only featherweight to beat Alexander Volkanovski and knocks him out in the second round. And that's Volkanovski that he did that to. Volkanovski, the same guy that beat Max Holloway 3 times. So on one end, you've got this champion that looks like he doesn't have plans of, giving up his belt anytime soon. But you've got Max Holloway. Max Holloway has always been the second best featherweight. Always been the second best featherweight behind Alexander Volkanovski. And no featherweight can really compete with Holloway outside of Volkanovski. Whether it's the, 5 years ago, current modern era of the UFC, every featherweight is kind of just been getting destroyed by Max Holloway. What he did to Arnold Allen and Korean Zombie, back when he did that, what he was doing to guys like Calvin Kattar as well. He's just dominating these featherweights. And then his recent performance against Justin Gaethje, a performance of a lifetime at UFC 300. It's so hard to pick against Max Holloway coming into this fight. Both of these guys are, the highest stock, and it's just a 50-50 fight. I can't wait for it. I don't know who to pick. So Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway, that is another genuinely 50-50 fight, but that is my thoughts on every title fight up and coming in the UFC and how close I think they're going to be. Let me know if you agree. Let me know what you think is the most obvious winner in a title fight and what you think is going to be the most 50-50 fight. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Cheers for watching.